Next, we shift to South Africa, where President Cyril Ramaphosa is warning that white supremacy is threatening the nation's unity. This amid worsening relations with the United States over claims of a white genocide and a bubbling G20 controversy. President Ramaphosa was speaking at a conference of the co-ruling African National Congress Party, the party of Nelson Mandela that defeated white minority rule in South Africa 3 decades ago.
Some in our society still adhere to notions of racial superiority and seek to maintain racial privilege. The vehement opposition by some groups to our policies of transformation and redress conveniently align with wider notions of white supremacy and white victimhood fed by false claims of the persecution of white Afrikaners in our country.
While not specifically naming the United States or Donald Trump, these comments from Ramaphosa come in the wake of an unsubstantiated claim by the US president of a genocide and land seizures against white Afrikaners. The claims were first made in the Oval Office when Ramaphosa was in the White House for bilateral talks. And on Monday, Ramaphosa urged global pushback against this rhetoric.
The propaganda of these false claims has real implications for our sovereignty, international relations, and national security. It is essential that we counter this narrative and defeat this agenda through direct and frank engagement, mobilizing broad support for the South African vision of non-racialism, reconciliation, and transformation.
After what some have described as Trump's White House ambush on Ramaphosa, relations have become further strained, culminating in the US boycott of Africa's first ever G20 Summit in Johannesburg. And after Ramaphosa refused to hand the presidency over to a more junior American official, Trump said South Africa would not be invited to next year's summit.
At the conclusion of the G20, South Africa refused to hand off the G20 presidency to a senior representative from our U.S. Embassy, who attended the closing ceremony. Therefore, at my direction, South Africa will not be receiving an invitation to the 2026 G20, which will be hosted in the great city of Miami, Florida next year.
South Africa have received support both publicly and privately from G20 member nations, according to Pretoria. But the South African administration has acknowledged the situation may require patience.
About this time next year, the UK will be taking over the G20 presidency. We will be able to engage meaningfully and substantively over what really matters to the rest of the world. For now, we will take a commercial break until we resume normal programming.
Other points of friction between the two countries include a 30% tariff on South African goods. Pretoria's attempts to reduce this levy, the highest in sub-Saharan Africa, have been denied. The US Senate is also proposing South Africa's removal from AGOA, a key trade agreement that removes duties on almost 2,000 goods. As of yet, there has been no response from the Trump administration to Ramaphosa's latest comments. But with the South African president calling for a global pushback against the US president's rhetoric, this intense bilateral feud could be set for another flashpoint.
They promised glory. They delivered fear. They shaped nations. They scarred generations. From brutal purges to propaganda machines, from stolen power to violent falls from the throne. Welcome to The Dictator, a series that strips away the myth and then exposes the men behind the tyranny. History remembers their power. Firstpost reveals their truth.